welcome back to the Gentle and Lowly Co podcast. I'm Addie, your host, and today we will be continuing our Fellowship Over Followers book series, our study series, with my two good friends, Bekah and Will. We're going to unpack chapter 2 today, but first, just welcome Bekah and Will to the podcast.
Hey.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so glad you guys are here. Well, I guess I'm here in your home. That's how this works. But I'm really excited for our conversation today. But first, for our friends who don't know you, just, share a little bit about yourselves and just the season of life you guys are in.
Yeah. So we're a young little couple, early 20s.
Yeah.
Just bought our first home. So we're really excited about that. Living here in Knoxville, getting to, figure out life together, but also just exploring everything that's here. Like we were just talking with someone at breakfast who was talking about the most amazing breakfast place. It was not the one we went to. It was something else in town.
Even though it's very good.
I had never heard of it. So I'm really excited. So there's always things that we're finding and learning and just exploring that together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's all pretty much covered it.
Will's the guy with words. He is, which is very true.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a sweet season to be in. And also you guys just had your 2nd anniversary, which is kind of sweet. So happy anniversary. It's exciting. But also I love your guys' house. This is so much fun. And I definitely want to come back. Just Knoxville's a cool place. But I guess don't move here because the traffic is already crazy. I mean, to not make it worse. Because, everyone's going to Austin.
Oh, yes.
I mean, to keep it cool. And you want me or other friends to move different places so you can come visit. So we have that swap.
I go to London.
Yeah. London.
London.
Oh.
I just want to visit.
Okay.
I want to have a friend.
I mean, I want to go to London, but that'd be really cool. Well, maybe I'll go study there. I don't know. You never know. It's really cool. But I just think that helps people just get to know you guys a little bit better. First, let's just jump into our first segment, Music of the Week. I always love this. And also, you might be able to see this in the frame if you're watching on YouTube. Will has all the guitars and all of his keys, all of the music things.
Yeah.
So I feel like we have a true musician in the house. Yeah, which is pretty cool. But for me, this week, it was actually when I was driving here just a couple of days ago. One of my friends, Liz, shout out to Liz, love her. And she was like, Addie, you should check out Andy Squires. I hope I said his last name right.
Yeah.
And it's like his whole thing, the way that she described him to me is like, he did a lot of ministry and things, and he still has like a heart for the church, but he's like, I don't love the church, I love Jesus. And I was like, yeah, I want to be friends with this guy, just listen to his stuff. So I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I actually had one of his songs already pre-liked. I was like, oh, this is cool. So his stuff I've been really checking out, and that's been really good. Then there's this other song, and it just kind of came on, and it was just kind of connected to this conversation my friend Caitlin and I had earlier that morning. And it's called, I don't know it really, but it's Always With You by Loud Harp. And it's just kind of like a good reminder that God's always with you. And I was like, oh, this is so good. Going through the mountains. I'm like, yeah, he is always with me. So those are my two, at least, kind of for this week.
That's so good.
Yeah.
I love Loud Harp. Killian showed me that one.
Yeah, it's a good artist.
Okay,
He's
good.
a really good artist.
Kind of listen to more of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So song of the week, what would it be for you?
Well, this past week, I would say Marjorie by Taylor Swift has really been hit. Okay, don't laugh at me.
Taylor Swift.
Will doesn't like Taylor Swift as much as I do.
T-Swift.
But this specific song, if I'm getting the backstory right, I think she wrote it about her grandmother.
Oh.
And I think she passed away. And so just the lyrics hit my heart of what it feels like to lose someone that you were close to.
Yeah.
And it just, I really connected with it, and it's just been on my mind a lot lately. But usually, if I had to recommend an artist, usually John Mark Pantana's the guy.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
Love him. But also Taylor Swift.
We love Taylor.
Well, I feel like I was late to the whole game. Taylor, I don't know. I didn't really get Spotify till it was 2015, college, all the things, whatever, which is a long time. But it's like the Lover album. I'm like, those songs. I don't know. I like that album a lot. And so there's some other ones where I'm like, oh, this Christmas one is fun and stuff like that. But I'll have to listen to that one.
Yeah.
Taylor's great.
The best Taylor
So cool.
song, though, I still think is the one, is like
Exile.
Bon Iver or whatever. Exile.
Bon Iver.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So good.
That's a really good one too.
That's good.
But
Okay.
it's also not mainly her vocals. So music of the week for me, I keep going with like older styles and genres and artists, and one of my favorites right now is Bill Withers. And so like the other day, like it's been rainy here in like the little spring season.
We got rained on.
So like
Yes.
I'll leave back early in the morning. I'm going to work, and I'm like, ain't no sunshine when she's gone.
Oh my gosh. Really in your feels.
It's
Yeah.
so good. But I mean,
Well.
it's beautiful music. It's
Yeah.
It's good
very
stuff.
tasteful, and
Yeah.
I like some of those
Nice.
because they go a little bit longer and just kind of vibe out for a while.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Where
It's good.
the stuff coming out today for our short attention span is just like quick.
It's gone. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I totally forgot about this album. Corey Asbury's what is it? About a Fool? To Love a Fool? I don't know. But his live edition of that, oh my gosh.
I haven't heard it.
There's some spontaneous ones there and they go for like 8 or 6 minutes, 6-8 minutes long. And I was like, that's the stuff.
That's more fun.
It's really good. So that one's a great one too. I can't believe I forgot about that one. I was like, oh, this is so good. Said, how have I not listened to this? And like listening to an album in its entirety is just different too. So, okay. But I gotta, maybe I'll check out Bill Withers. I don't know if it'll be the vibe.
You
but
might just love it.
might
Check
just
them out
love
for
it.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of drive-ins, so a lot of opportunities to explore music, which is
Yeah.
great. That's why I love this segment so
Yeah.
much. It's a lot of fun. But just moving kind of into more of our week, that theme of the week, thinking back to your week, what was that theme that kind of stood out to you for this week?
Well, we were talking about this the other day, just kind of trying to process like what our weeks have been looking like because it's been busy. So a collective answer that we came up with
Oh, okay.
was exploration. Because because we just got back from New York.
Oh, yeah.
A couple of our friends just got
Right.
engaged and
Yep.
it was really fun. And so
So
we've been
cool.
traveling a lot. We were in California for 3 months last year.
Yeah.
And just like exploring our town that we live in too. So it's like
Yeah.
we're just learning a lot of new things, just trying to figure out what life looks like for us individually and for each other. And it's just
I think even contrasting like this past week to the past kind of shows me like even individually and as a couple like just healing and growing. Because I think when we first came here 2 years ago, everything like every new thing was hard. Like getting up,
That's fair.
going out, going to
Yeah.
coffee, doing like
Yeah.
everything was a stretch. Like just being able to function.
yeah.
So to do those big jumps, we're like, okay, we went to California for a few months, but there's time to adjust.
Yes.
And then this past week, we went to, I went to Atlanta, and then I came back, and we went to Greenville, Richmond,
Yeah, I was like, you were in
drove
all
up
the
to
places.
Long Island,
I
flew
was like,
back,
yeah.
and it
cool.
was like nothing. It was
Yeah.
just fun, like all
Yeah.
new places, all new
Oh, that's good.
experiences, and to be able to thrive in that
Yeah.
was not our reality 2 years ago, or even a year
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool, kind of fun for me.
That's very cool. No, yeah, I definitely feel that. I mean, thankfully, like 2 weeks, I'm like officially past the halfway mark of this trip, which is exciting and things. But one of my friends, Mel, she's been on the podcast and just a couple weeks ago actually, and 2 times she's been on, and she like does these like different questions of like on Thursdays, like how do we feel about this? And people just answer it and it's really fun. But this week it was like, what's the current book chapter, like the title of your chapter of life you would be in? And all the answers were really interesting. And I was like, yeah, just learning as I go. You know, it's like, because especially with this trip in particular, there's a lot of new things I've been doing. And I mean, honestly, you know, never launched a book before, never done those things. And a lot of people have never done that. And so it is hard to like, you know, kind of just figure it out as you go and to know the things. But I'm like, I know the next one's going to be just, you know, it's going to be better because now I know what to do. And even with this trip, there's been a lot of things of like, oh yeah, I don't know what the day's going to look like, which is exciting at the same time. That was kind of a little bit of last week too. But this week, like, you know, just being away from home, like with Kodak, my dog, and just like the, your space and things. I don't know, just miss my family and my church too. I mean, just that small group, like it's been really encouraging how they've been like, Addie, we're praying for you. Like, we're excited. We can't wait to hear what God's doing. And I'm like, I don't feel like I'm doing anything super crazy, but it is at the same time. But it's encouraging, like, that this work is meaningful, and even though it's not like my full-time thing. So I was deeply encouraged that God was just meeting me where I was at in the week. So
even like just movement and like taking the steps before you're like, okay, I know I'm supposed to do this.
Yes, and go in faith.
Don't know what it's gonna look like.
Yeah. But
that's cool.
Yeah. So it's been really cool to see that, just different kind of small things of confirmation and encouragement in that too. So yeah. And I guess speaking of the book, that's what we're here for. Chapter 2. This episode, in chapter 2, it's We Are Called to More. And so we're going to unpack that chapter. And for our first question, I wanted to read just a part of the chapter just to kind of get us, on the same page. And for our friends who might have, haven't read it yet, encourage you to get a book and follow along with us. But it's just like this idea kind of just unpacking this question. We're all called to more, but this is in just a few pages into that chapter 2, and it says, we all want our lives to matter. We desire to make an impact. We want there to be meaning in our lives. We all do, and so does Jesus. So just from this opening section of chapter 2, when did you guys question if there was more to life, or even the question of asking, like, what was I put here on earth to do? Which is a deep question. I mean, that's very deep.
It is.
But like, that's what this book and this podcast is, to help us go deeper.
I'll go first and give Bekah a few more seconds to process.
We're processors, so that's why. Will, you get to answer.
I jump off. It might not be the best thought, the smartest thought, but it's a thought.
Yeah.
So,
it is, and we're processing together.
Let's see. So growing up, I'd say I didn't really think about it, honestly, as a kid. Like, oh, why am I here? I was more so concerned with, how do I exist, function, sports, whatever function, like those types of things up until I got saved. Okay. So when, I think it was 2015, I was 15 years old, and April 8th, that was the day that I actually became a follower of Jesus. And from that moment on, I really felt called to worship. And not just like, be a songwriter, be on stage, but be a worship pastor's pastor. Like I really wanted to inform people of, here's the meaning of worship, here's the purpose of worship, and here's how I can encourage and empower you in this. And I've spent a lot of time in different roles and capacities actually doing that. But as of the past couple of years, I've stepped away from that entirely. So it's been kind of interesting for me, thinking of like bigger than myself type things. Yeah. From the time I was 15 until 2 years ago, it was really easy for me to just think, this is what I'm supposed to do. Yeah. I'm going to be a worship pastor, and eventually I'll pastor other worship pastors, and that's it. That's all I'm living for. And I'm doing it for Jesus. But the past couple of years has been really interesting because I've been learning, what does it look like to still be who I am entirely, still set apart for Jesus, still living with him and loving him and like living for him and unto him, but not at the capacity of worship on stage, training others, pastoring anybody, at least in a formal setting. Right. So having that role, and that's been really freeing, honestly. Like we can talk more about it, but I don't want to take a whole lot of time, but just as far as seeing something bigger than myself, I didn't have a plan until I was saved. From saved until 2 years ago, I thought it's worship. And now I'm just learning, like, what does it look like just to be with Jesus and be a son?
Yeah. Follow him and to share his light in that sense. Yeah. Which can be, I mean, it can be harder in a sense where just because you had this future or this ideal thing of like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do. But it's still like having that honest conversation with the Lord and like trusted people around you of like, hey, just trying to figure it out as you go, but just to really ask him like, okay, well, if that's not the thing anymore, show me what is it? Yeah. But I think that's like a really practical way, and honestly, like one of the first things like we're called to as believers is to live, you know, in that that sonship or that daughtership, you know, as a son or a daughter, and to be able to be a part of his family. And like people will notice that by the way we live. That's different. I was thinking about this question, and I do kind of answer it in the book, where I was like in 8th grade, where it was like really trying to discover like my whole life's purpose and everything of like, okay, like what am I supposed to do? But honestly, I bet the thought was like earlier than that, because in 6th grade, that's when my dad left. And my parents were separated all the way up until middle of high school in 2013. Then that's when they got divorced. And so there was just like a lot of questioning for me throughout those years, but specifically like in middle school, I was really like asking and just like having conversations with the Lord and just being like, like, what am I supposed to do? And just kind of asking like, is there something more? And just growing to a Christian school, you know the Bible, you know the gospel, you know about Jesus, and we'll get into that in our next question. But it really wasn't like until, you know, probably that 8th grade moment where I was like really wrestling of like, I gotta know what I'm supposed to do. And I think like every believer comes to that point where they're like tell me, you know, which way am I supposed to go? And maybe you can feel that pressure when you're in school, you know, then college and all those things. And so it's just interesting because I was even talking with my friend Leslie, who was on a couple weeks ago, who interviewed me for this book. And we were talking about it. She was like, yeah, I just remember one night like looking up at the sky and seeing all the stars. And she's just like, like, what was I put here to do? So it's really cool to like see that internal dialogue, just like within ourselves. And like, we all have that question. And like, probably similar for me, it's like until I found Jesus, then I was, you know, that kind of helped me find that purpose in the sense of like, oh, I'm to love him, to love others, and to share the gospel. Mm-hmm.
And have you seen that, like what it looks like has changed, like evolved over time?
Yes, very, very much.
How have you seen that?
Yeah. I mean, I knew I was creative and I was like, like my whole thing was then, you know, that 8th grade year, I was like, okay. Then freshman year, I guess 8th grade was just like admitting I was creative and all these things. I don't know why that was such a struggle for me. I really don't know, but maybe I just didn't want to be boxed in. And then freshman year, photography class, photography 2, and because my teacher just really encouraged me. And then it was like, oh, photography is the thing. Like I'm going to go to school for that. And then I thought I was going to go like be a National Geographic photographer, all these things, which was super cool. But it's like, then I was even talking to Tim in this last episode, which is going to be a later chapter. I was talking of like, yeah, like even while I was at the porch at SCAD, like the Lord shifted my heart more for ministry of like, and investing in people, because what we do will always change, but people are going to stay in our lives. Hopefully. I mean, they might not forever, but just like being with people and investing in them, like that's one of the greatest investments. I mean, it's hard to believe like, you guys, like this October will be 5 years since I've known you guys at least. I mean, like,
wow.
Like, I mean, I've met you Will, pretty early
yesterday.
on.
Yeah.
Not yesterday, but no, like pretty early on when I moved to South Bend.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, who is this guy? Oh, communications, this is cool, photography people. And then you were on the photo team and volunteering and stuff. And I was like, oh, these are my people, you know? And it's just really crazy to think like, you know, there have been a lot of different seasons and a lot of change. You know, you guys obviously, you know, dating and married and then moving and stuff, but then I've gone through a lot of different seasons as well. And I think like that's one of the things that makes friendship sweeter as time goes on, is like we stick with it, and it's hard. And sometimes then, you know, the seasons are hard to talk about, but it, you know, it's like, okay, well, let's try to, you know, maybe heal from different things that we've had to walk through, and we can process that together as processors that we are. But it will always change, I think. And it's like, you know, if you hear God telling you to do something, they're like, okay, try stepping out in faith. And then if not, okay, reroute, redirect. You know, yeah. I mean, this whole thing, even to get here, was 4 years in the making. I mean, I have told people before on the podcast, like Learning from Failure, I've started 3 podcasts. This third one is the most successful one because we made it past a year and stuff. And so it's like, figure out what works and what doesn't. Like, what has God put in you, and use those skills for him.
Very good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What about you, Bekah?
Pretty much along the same lines of like, I felt like I've always known that I was supposed to be in communion and relationship with the Lord. But I grew up a pastor's kid, and so I always felt really disconnected from, like, I don't want to say reality, but it's like growing up, I always felt like I had to put on a facade and have this front for people to show that like I am this perfect pastor's daughter, and like make sure that everyone viewed my parents as like these good people and that they are good pastors. And it's like, they're not bad people. I'm not saying they're bad people. It's just like to help their reputation as their child. I wanted to make sure that they were good, and people saw that they were good through how they raised me and how I am.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I've just always grown up like, what am I supposed to do? And who am I? And so that was the biggest thing of like, who am I? And the only way I could figure that out is looking at who he is. Yeah. And I didn't really get to discover that until I moved to Dallas in 2020 during COVID. And I went to Upper Room, did the ministry school, and that's when I really felt like I discovered who I was. And then just kind of went from there. But like to this day, I'm still like in a church, out of a church, in regular life. Like that is what I'm made to do, is to be with him, whether it's in music or in like my daily life or just making conversation with someone at a coffee shop. Like he is always there, and he's my best friend.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I love that. And even before you said it, I was like, Dallas, like that's what it was for you. And seeing you like be faithful to go there, and that was a really hard thing to leave, especially a place. I mean, I think that, you know, you just grow up and you just know, then to be stretched in a different way. I mean, like when I went to SCAD, I think that was the best thing to get away from just what we know and to allow the Lord to work or speak into our lives in a different way, where it's like, oh, he's talking just to me. Like I just get to be Addie. You get to just be Bekah.
Yeah.
And you get to just be Will. And that's a beautiful gift. And not everyone gets to experience that. And like, that's my hope, is that like from this book, even from our conversation, like people will hopefully be able to ask the Lord, like, hey, who have you made me to be, like as your son or your daughter? Which is exciting because we all carry something different. Yeah. I guess kind of shifting gears a little bit. So we kind of, you know, we talked about more of that like bigger picture, bigger idea, but really like asking the question, when did the gospel become personal for you? Because that's the next question I have in our notes of like, when did you feel the weight of your own sin or just sin in general? But there is a difference when you feel your sin and then you're like, oh, this is actually for everyone, that the gospel and like the weight that Jesus carried on the cross.
See, this question for me is interesting.
Okay.
Because I mean, obviously, like sin is a reality of our broken world. Like all of us have sinned. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. But what's interesting for me is like when it became personal, sin actually wasn't the focus. Which is interesting. Like, because I've heard a lot of people, they're like, hey, your sin is so great. Your sin is so bad that you need it. And like, the reality is, even the smallest sin makes you, like, the penalty is death.
Right.
And total separation from God. Formed me and what brought me to him, it was just like looking at him, like magnifying, like, oh, you are so good, so great, so kind, even to like wrap yourself in human form. Like this tiny thing that you made, this microscopic little thing, but you care so deeply about it. And even more than that, out of all of the people and all of time, you've also made yourself evident and available to me. Right. So I think that was really like what opened my eyes to be like, okay, it wasn't necessarily like, oh, my sin is so terrible. It was, wow, Jesus is so good. And I like maybe a little bit of like, I'm so undeserving.
Right.
Which
like that
I think kind of goes
unworthiness.
through
Yeah.
the lens of sin,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it was like, it wasn't like this lowering of myself. It was more of this magnifying of
like
him.
he is so much bigger than me, and he
Yeah.
deeply cares about me.
Yeah.
Like I'm only one person. Like I've absolutely been there, and it kind of blows your mind. I mean, the best way. You're like, wow, and he wants to talk to me. He wants to have a relationship with me, and like we don't always, in other, I guess religion is different things, different stories. Like that isn't modeled. Like God getting low. And that's why, I mean, like the gentle love of Jesus, like this whole podcast, like he is lowly in heart, but he also is so high and so holy at the same time. So I think that's really cool. But it might have been at a young adult retreat we were on, Will. But you shared your testimony, and it was like about youth group, and I don't want to share it for you, but do you know what I'm talking about?
Not yet. Give me a few clues.
Okay. Well, it's like you were
maybe.
going to youth group, and you like kind of always went, and you almost felt like this pressure to be there for other people, to have it like all like that perfect image, kind of. And I remember you mentioned your sister, and then like you like maybe something was said. I'm trying to remember it. And then you're like, oh, kind of got annoyed. You got out of the car, and then like the Lord like did something.
Yeah. Okay, so that was actually that would be going back to the April 8th.
Oh, okay.
That was the night. So this is the night that I got saved. It was nuts. It was so fun.
Yeah, but like I just remember that, and I was like, oh, that's like it was encouraging to me. So.
Do you want me to go into that a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, sick.
Yeah. The quick version.
Great story. So
It is.
I mean, I know the gospel. Like I know, hey, Jesus did this thing for me. He died for me. He gave himself up for me. Because I'm so awful and so sinful and whatever. And there so many thoughts going through my head. Like one, like why did God create me in the first place if I'm just gonna screw things up and they're gonna like beat me in with a head for
That's
it?
a very valid thought.
So like a bunch of things going on. I'm a little teenager. I was 15. And I went to youth group and we're writing out the gospel. I just ditched whatever they were talking about because I was just having a conversation with God and about just the holiness of him and realizing like there is nothing that I can do to ever portray myself good enough to fool him. Like I can have every single person in youth group think that I'm the most wonderful person ever. I don't think anyone did, but even if I got to that point, it wouldn't matter because God still knows that I fall short of what he is requiring because he is fully just and he's so set apart, he's holy. So I went in the car. Well, actually, I talked with one of my leaders. He started sharing the gospel. I'm like, I get it. I'm not ready.
You're like, yeah.
So I left. They thought it was going to happen there. I left. Got in the car, and we went to Chick-fil-A because that's what we did. We went to Chick-fil-A and then stole Krispy Kreme donuts afterwards. And that's a different story we will not go into.
Different story
today.
Yes.
And before we got out of the car, Bethany is just telling me the gospel again, more and more and more. And it wasn't really anything that she said. It was just that she kept me thinking about what I was already processing. She wasn't letting me just move on.
Right, like
to
don't
get
just
my
push
chicken
past
sandwich.
it. Yeah.
I just want my filet.
You're like, I want the food.
Like I can return to this.
Right.
But
She's
she
like,
just
no.
kept going. And at one moment in that, it just finally like clicked. I don't know a better way to say it, but it literally felt like scales falling off my eyes. Like everything seemed brighter and less dull. And like I was crying like crazy. I don't even know why. I cried, but not that much.
You're like, whoa, what's happening? Yeah.
And it was just, I think, feeling the weight of the glory of God, of him making himself so evident, like in such a kind but powerful and personal way. And I felt like, I felt like a lowering, like I was physically just sitting there, but like spiritually, I felt like I was falling through the floor. So it is interesting. Like, I mean, that was when it became real for me, but the thought wasn't sin. It was like, wow, Jesus, you are so good.
Yeah.
And I was rocked. April 8th, 2015.
2015.
forever changed. You can slap that on a t-shirt.
There you go.
It'd be good.
It's probably already on a t-shirt
probably
is. I don't know about
is.
April 8th, but maybe.
Yeah, maybe not April 8th. Yeah, probably not in 2015. But yeah, well, I just remember that story. And I think for a lot of people who just have grown up in the church, like we just already know what it is. And that's hopefully, I mean, in the words that are in this book, it's like let's not rush past like what happened, like what God actually did and who he is. Just because we're so familiar with it, it's like, oh yeah, I know the gospel, I know Jesus died, he rose again. Like, but it's like, what? It's like the greatest thing. Like, he's the greatest person. And so that really kind of struck me, I think, even back then, a couple years ago, just because it's so easy to get caught up in like that image of our reputation and to protect it, to protect ourselves, and where it can just kind of build us up where we're like, oh yeah, I already know. Like, I'm good. And like, that's not what Jesus calls us to. I mean, he continues to call us deeper into relationship with him and to continue to learn from him. So yeah, as I was preparing for this, I was like, oh yeah, that story came back up. Yeah. So I thought it was good. But real quick, Bekah, do you have any thoughts, any more thoughts about that question?
I was just like, I feel like most of my responses are going to be very similar to Will's.
Which is okay.
Of like just the main theme of what I'm saying, but obviously experiences are different.
Yeah.
But like, same thing as Will, I never really, I wouldn't say I felt the weight of my own sin. I more so felt the weight of how broken and for lack of a better word, helpless I was as a human. And like, it's back in, I think it was before I met you, so it was probably 2018. And I was really, really struggling with depression, and I had really, really bad anxiety. And I think fall of 2018, I started having suicidal ideations, and it became a very, very serious situation. And I think it was a night I was planning on killing myself. And the Lord met me that night, and I became like so aware of how broken I was and how much I really, really needed him to just get through the day. And so that's, I think, when my relationship with him became more real and more tangible for me. It's just because, like, I don't know, just growing up as a pastor's kid, you think you got it figured out, and then
you think you do,
suddenly you realize you
whoa.
don't, and the next thing I knew is I didn't want to live another day, and the Lord was like, no, I have different plans for you, and I'm here to be with you. I want to be your friend. I want to be your brother. I want to be your father. And just realizing how tangible he really can be in your life was just when it became my life.
Real.
And why I live.
Right, exactly. And that he does have a plan for your life. I mean, I think it can be, unfortunately, like really easy in our world today to get to a dark place. I mean, especially just depending upon, you know, how you think about the world and different things. I mean, like, I know I've been in seasons where I'm like, wow, I'm really sad. I don't really know why, but like, I'm really sad. And you can feel so helpless. And like, for the Lord to meet you there, and like no one else is there, and you see his goodness and his kindness, like that can wreck you. Thinking about, I mean, my story is a little bit different, but still, like, it is interesting because, you know, I was telling my friends about this conversation of how, like, we all have similar backgrounds in a sense of, like, you know, growing up in a Christian home or pastor's kid. Like, my parents co-founded a ministry in a garage in Marion, Indiana, and like the ministry continued, and they didn't continue with it, but like ministry was still a thing that was on their heart, and kind of like that still like led and guided us as a family. And in that ministry, like deep camp, going to that, like the Lord used in my life so much. But I remember just growing up and like going to other types of camp or like VBS and different things of like, oh yeah, like, yeah, I'm going to accept Jesus. Yay. You know, of course. Because I felt, for me, like I did feel like this weight of unworthiness in that sense. But it was like, oh yeah, my sin is heavy, and like, just like, oh, I am separated from God and I want to get back to being with him. And, it would always be around like that campfire time, you know, at camp and stuff. And for some reason, like it hadn't clicked yet for me, where I continuously thought like I had to recommit my life, because I was like, oh, well, crap, I sinned again. Like I have to do it all over again. Like he won't accept me again. And I don't know why, like that was the thought pattern for me. But it was like one night at, you know, that campfire camp, you know, around the camp and stuff. And where it was like, oh, like, and it clicked of like, oh, Jesus, he's paid it all. Like I get to just be with him, and he gets to be my friend. He gets to be my dad, and I can go to him with everything. And I don't have to perform in that sense. And like, that's like that kind of, I feel like that's like a thread in this conversation of, it's really easy, you know, to get into that mindset of like, oh, you know, that works and acts of like, no, he's already done it. Like he wants to be with us. And that's when it kind of clicked for me. But then, so that was probably like elementary school, you know, kind of throughout there. And then 6th grade, like I was talking about earlier, like 6th through 8th grade, I knew I was saved. I knew who Jesus was, but I was still like walking out my faith of like, the Lord was like, you know, breaking down my heart of like, Addie, you gotta let that go. All these different things, a lot of refinement in a sense. And like, that's what it means, I think, to walk with Jesus, to like, he's going to continue to help us, to guide us in this different way that he has modeled. But I think like all of our stories being the similarities and like the differences, I know, and I'm praying that they will relate to hopefully the people, you know, who listen, who watch this, that like, you're not alone. And God has a plan for your life, and he's with you. But for our last question, you know, now we're not in that place anymore, where, we do kind of what you said earlier, Will, like we do live in a fallen world, and there is consequences of sin. And so like, there is like that brokenness of the world. But like the Lord has been faithful, and he has, you know, saved us. He's called us his. And so now it's really kind of like what I was saying of like, to not forget the gospel. So what encouragement would you give for friends listening, and even maybe encouragement you found for yourself, to help cultivate a heart of remembrance for the gospel and for Jesus, and just like living a life devoted to him?
Yeah. This might be a little more unconventional, at least in what I was taught. This might be very normal for other people.
Yeah. Okay.
But one thing that God's been highlighting to me over the past really few years is being loved by him first. Because it's really easy for me to be like, okay, here's like 3 steps for you to do better than where you're at today. Here's a couple of steps. Here's a thing. But people like me, like it's really easy to do that, to take it on. Like you're looking, scouring for another nugget or something I can take and tangibly use. But one thing I keep seeing repeated through scripture is where it shows like, hey, we do this. Hey, we can love because we were first loved.
Yeah.
So I think if I was going to encourage someone in something, it would more so be to gaze at Jesus, to get to see the person that he is. And when you see who he is and what he's done for you, like you learn his heart for you, you start to realize how loving and how great and how majestic and how beautiful he is in the gospel with that. But even just his constant presence in everyday life. Like I feel like today I don't have to necessarily, I remember what he did, but I also just get to recognize him today and recognize that he does love me, that my first calling is really to be loved, like his beloved. And out of that, everything I feel like just, it has happened so much more naturally, where I always felt burnout in youth ministry and in traveling with other ministries and other churches. Anytime I started with, here's the impact I want to make. Here's the people that I want to love for Jesus. I did well for a while.
Yeah.
And then I crashed.
Yeah.
Again and
Only
again.
for
and
so long. Yeah.
I just thought that's my life. That's what God's called me to.
That's it. Yeah.
And for the past few years, when I started to just embrace like, oh, I am to be loved first.
Yeah.
Everything has happened like so much more naturally. Listening to the Spirit, like a couple things happen is I'm able to recognize when I should and should not step into something.
Yeah.
Because he might have someone already lined up that he wants to fill it in.
Yeah.
And I'm actually spending myself to overstep where he wants someone else there.
Yeah.
It's like little things like that, but a lot of it is just hearing him, knowing him, obeying him, but it starts with gazing at him.
Yeah. It's knowing who he is, and then him filling you, you just live out of that overflow. So it's like if you're just spending yourself constantly and not like living out of who he is, it's just like you're gonna get burnt out so quick, and it's just not fun, and it's not good. Like, I'm not saying you can't do good things
Right.
by yourself. Like, you can. You are capable. But you are capable of so much more with him.
With him. Yes. Yeah. And like that kind of lifestyle, just like that previous way you approached everything, it's really not practical. It's not like, long term. And I just think of like, it's a gift to be loved by God and to rest in that and rest in his goodness. And I mean, we can try, to plan things, and planning isn't bad, or, to use the gifts that we have in different things. But like it really, like we're saying, it really does come to be filled with him. And then out of that, then we're able to give to others. And like that, I feel like that's a perfect kind of like wrap up of our final thoughts, in a sense where like this whole book, I think the main point that I do drive is like, yes, we're called to different things. God wants to use you. He has a plan for your life, all of these different things, but it starts with him. It doesn't start with you at all. And it starts with looking at him, being in communion with him, and then we're able to, live sent and just to be, in the world and to share that with others. And it's less striving and more resting in him. Yeah. Yeah.
Just abiding with him.
Yeah, abiding with him. I love it.
He's all that matters.
Yeah. That's good. So for our friends, Bekah and Will, just the people who don't know you, but they want to continue following along with your journey, where can they just kind of stay up to date of what you guys are doing?
Yeah, I post, not daily, but just about, to Instagram.
Yeah.
will.spear. Good news is you'll be able to see myself and Bekah there, because I've always have a camera on him.
Always.
He always has a camera.
I just
This is
love
the
it.
best thing though about visiting. I've told so many people, I'm like, wow, I have friends who have cameras to take photos of me, and it's so great. Because usually I'm the one having to do it, and like we'll just post it. I'm like, wow, oh my gosh, look at that photo with me at a bookstore. My name.
Sometimes you don't
It's
even
great.
know he's taking it.
You don't even know, and that's the best part. And that is what a good photographer does, in my opinion. I think so. They're sneaky.
Oh,
Yeah.
little Jehovah sneaky action. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's good. But honestly, like Will, Bekah, like I'm so thankful for both of you and your friendship and just, what it means to me. And can't believe, 5 years. That's crazy, but it's so exciting. And I feel like the Lord's just getting started. And so can't wait, hopefully, for this conversation to bless people. But I'm really thankful for you guys and just taking the time to be on this podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And friends, next week we'll be unpacking chapter 3 of Fellowship Over Followers. And until then, continue to carry the gentle love of Jesus. Yay!